Hello, everybody. My name is Joshua Smith. I am the Regional Sales Manager for Team North here at Nice Schloss and Fleming. Thank you all so much for being able to come out here today to spend a few minutes with me to learn a little bit more about verbal and nonverbal cues and how to effectively spot and utilize those clues during a sales appointment. To get maybe a potential elephant in the room out of the way, everything that was kind of created in essence for this webinar was kind of created with Jessie in mind. She is one of the agency managers here at NNF, but there was a scheduling conflict, so I'm filling in for her. So if you're kind of shocked or see Josh as opposed to Jessie, I apologize, but I promise that I will try my best to have the best webinar that we can, and I'm definitely going to be here to answer any questions that you might have along the way. So, with all that said, let's get on to the rest of the webinar. So, verbal and nonverbal clues. So, when selling to customers, your nonverbal communication skills, such as active listening and interpreting nonverbal clues, are just as important as what you say. Developing these skills will help you understand what your customers want so that you can offer them the most suitable products and services. Interpreting your customers' nonverbal signals and behaviors allow you to read their attitude and better understand their needs. Projecting the right nonverbal cues yourself can help your customer feel at ease. And so a lot of the things that we're going to go over today may seem a little self-explanatory, but even as we kind of look at that, there's not often a whole lot of self-reflection of what we actually do ourselves when we're sitting down with a client. It kind of flows pretty naturally, right? In this case, what I really want you guys to start doing while you're on appointments or, even just out in the general public is just start to be a little bit more cognizant about what you're doing non-verbally and how that might be interpreted by whomever that it is that you're speaking with. So some examples of nonverbal cues. This is going to be, like I mentioned before, so when you're selling to customers, you want to, or excuse me, this is basically what we're going to be going over with for the rest of today, basically the agenda. So we're going to go over some more examples of nonverbal clues on our side. We're going to talk about dressing for the sale and getting the prospect to open up, and what to look for on the client side. And here's a quick table about some examples of nonverbal clues. And again, a lot of this is going to look like, self-explanatory. Oh, this is the kind of a no-duh sort of situation. But again, just to start to think about, how you kind of internally do some of these things, potentially without even noticing, or how you can notice these or start to look for some of these clues whilst you're sitting across from someone at a one-on-one appointment setting. So taking a look at their facial expressions. Are they raising their eyebrows? Are they smiling? All those things we associate with being good. Furrowing of the brow, rolling of the eyes are something that's always construed as bad. Maintaining your eye contact. For eye contact, I've always felt that you want to really mirror the person sitting across from you. Sometimes you'll have someone that will always look you straight in the eye because that's what they're comfortable with. Maybe they grew up, with that understanding and they always look someone in the eye. But if they're kind of, gazing around looking at something else, and not every time, but it might be a social anxiety that they don't want to look you directly in the eye, so look otherwhere. And if you notice that, maybe you shouldn't solely focus on looking them in the eye, even though that's something that you often do. But to keep them more at ease, look around the room a little bit more. Look down at the papers. Look across from them. Don't fully neglect them, but definitely want to kind of mirror what the person across the table is doing for you. What are you doing with your hands? Are you freely removing them? Are you talking with them? Are you touching the product? Or is the person across from you, have their arms crossed near their face or touching their face a lot or near their chest? So all these things are kind of good telltale signs about how the person is feeling without them having to say anything. But a lot of these are kind of it's a self-reflection, how you're projecting yourself. Are you doing any of these bad nonverbal cues to make the person sitting across from you think, one way or the other about you? Dressing for the sale. Remember, you always want to dress for your audience. You want to look professional, but not overdressed for the situation. For example, if you're selling a D-SNP plan, the client would relate better to someone who dressed in slacks and a polo shirt rather than a three-piece suit. And this is always kind of, situational. Here in Western PA, we've got a lot of rural areas, but we've got a lot of, you can go into the city for Pittsburgh at least. But you always want to cater to that particular clientele that you're going to. Like this is suggesting, you don't want to dress in slacks, or you do want to dress in slacks and a polo shirt if you're going out to the country where people don't typically dress up to go to work or anything like that, or they're not putting on their suits and slacks. But you want to feel like, you're comfortable and you're professional. But some appointments you might be sitting down with someone who's dressed a little bit more in that suit attire. So in that sort of scenario, gauge the clientele by, who it is that you're targeting in any of your marketing. That way you're really going to know the best fit for how you're dressing. Getting the prospect to open up. So again, this is going to be a lot of nonverbal information, but what you're going to want to do is, when you're meeting with the prospect in person, you want them to open up and have an understanding of the nonverbal communication in sales that can help you determine their state of mind. If a prospect is sitting with his or her arms folded, again, we already covered this, but it's not a good sign. Occasionally it's because either the office is too cold, but in most cases it's the nonverbal communication of disinterest. Get the prospect to unfold their arms. Fortunately, it can be pretty simple. If you want to start to open up your clients to the message, you can start by asking questions. If they don't start to relax and unfold their arms, you can start handing them things physically, like a brochure or a price list to read. That way, you're forcing them, or not necessarily forcing, but you're encouraging them to start their interaction so they're not too closed off to you, because you want to offer them to open up. That way, it starts a better dialogue. They'll start, thinking, all right, so it's a nonverbal cue for them. As soon as they open up their arms, they're going to be a little bit more open because you're handing something, they're taking it, you're working together, as opposed to being so, completely standoffish. So clues on the client side, and I do have a pretty hefty list for these as well. So this is what they're going to be doing, when they ask clarifying questions. So when a customer starts to ask specific questions, it may indicate their interest. And this may mean that they're approaching decision-making mode and that it may be ready for you to close the sale. So things like, how does this work? What will the impact be? Or can I use this for the application? All these are great indicators that your prospect is moving in the right direction. But before you move on, you want to make sure that your prospect understands what it is that you're offering. Answer the questions and consider asking for the sale right thereafter. When they're asking about price, and a brief disclaimer, if your customer immediately asks about the price just as you're beginning your sales pitch, they may be a shopper rather than a buyer. And so they may not be ready to close the sale right away, even though they are asking for the price. But when they ask about the price as you're nearing the end of the pitch, and especially if your prospects have been asking qualifying questions, that's a much better indicator that they may be ready to buy. And timing is very critical when it comes to closing a sale, as I'm sure all of you know. When you start to see a few signs during your sales pitch that the prospect is ready to close, that's going to be your cue. When a customer is giving you the right verbal and nonverbal cues. So a possible sign of interest is having a prospect lean toward you as the sale comes to an end. After they sat back while you explained the features and benefits during your pitch, they might also express positive interest through the tone of your voice, the tone of their voice, a more upbeat tone, quicker speed, raise of pitch. All of these are signaling that they're primed for you to close that sale. And again, for eye contact as well. When someone avoids making eye contact with you in the sales pitch, it may mean that they're not ready to make a decision yet. Sometimes you can tell a prospect is interested where they're engaged by making eye contact. Now, they may have decided to not buy, at least right then, but at least you know where they are in the process. If you combine eye contact with a positive tone and the right nonverbal cues, then you may be close to landing the sale. So we were talking a little bit earlier about that eye contact. And so if you don't have it, it may be that they're disinterested, or it may be just, an anxiety that they have. But you really do know when you are looking someone in the eye and they're leaning forward and they're talking to you and they're carrying on that conversation. That's a much better indicator that they are ready to buy. But it's not necessarily in all ways. For moods, you really want to step back and assess your prospect's mood. And this is something that we do all the time, but we just may not notice. Is the client that you're sitting across here, are they happy? Are they upbeat? Obviously, that's a good sign. But are they negative? Are they curt? Are they answering with one-word questions? That's not great. You may be able to shift the prospect's mood a little if you develop, more rapport. But a positive outlook from the get-go is a good sign. So obviously, if you are sitting across from someone and you're trying to get them to open up, but they're only doing, one-word answers, start looking around the room, looking around the house. If you're, at the kitchen table, what sort of pictures are out? Are you talking about their kids? Are you talking about their dogs? Do they have a grill? What are they cooking for dinner? Anything that you can do to help them alleviate their ease, and you want to build that friendship first, because you always sell yourself before you're actually selling the product. You also want to know if they, whilst you're at the appointment, you want to filter out any of those distractions as well. So you do want to pay attention to what they're doing while you're giving the sales pitch. Are you letting them talk on the phone, or is their phone silent? Are they checking email? Are they responding to texts? Are they focused on you and leaving their email and phone for later? You can never really know. I mean, you're always going to know what they're doing in front of you, but you want to make sure that all the distractions are gone, that the kids are out or in their rooms, or the dog is in the kennel, or so that you're not being completely distracted, because that's going to they're going to end up paying more attention to what's going on around them as opposed to actually focusing on you, the agent that's sitting across. You also want to find someone that's responsive to your questions. We already know that you should be asking at least as many questions as you answer. You can tell a lot by how your prospect responds as well. Do they give you details? Are they doing the yes or no answers? Are they providing more? If they're giving you more and you're building that relationship up, you really do have them on the hook, and that's about time that you want to just close the deal. I mentioned before that you're supposed to mirror them, but sometimes they will mirror you as well. So as you're assessing nonverbal cues, check to see if your prospects are mirroring your actions. Do they fold their hands when you do? Do they lean back when you lean back? If prospects mirror your body image, they may feel a connection, a trust that makes them feel comfortable. And like I mentioned before, the reverse is also true. You would make someone more at ease if you're mimicking their actions, because if you're doing something completely different that's a little bit foreign, and they're not going to respond as well to that as if they were, like you're sitting across the table from them. One thing that you don't want to do is if they're crossing their arms and they're looking mad, you obviously don't want to do that. You want to do something positive to open that up. But again, with like the eyesight, or where their hands at, are they sitting cross-legged? I don't know. But mirror, even their tonal voice, how they answer questions, how they respond, how fast the speed that you're talking is compared to theirs is going to make your life a whole lot easier, and you're going to build much better of a rapport once you start doing that. And the last one here we've got, they use a possessive tone. So if your prospects change their words to terms like mine, our, or my when they're talking about what you're selling, then that's a pretty good sign that they're visualizing themselves as having already made that deal. If you're talking in person about a physical object, if a prospect keeps touching the product, they may envision it as being theirs already. Timing, again, is absolutely critical when it comes to closing the sale. When you see a few of those signs during your sales pitch, this may be your cue that it can indeed close the sale. Ask if they're ready to proceed and make this deal into reality. The more sales pitch you make, the better that you get at evaluating your prospects. And that's always true. We always know that. The more you do one thing, it's always like practice, the better you're going to get. You're going to be able to improve the number of sales and deals as you go about more of these appointments that you go on. And the more comfortable and the better you are going to be recognizing these particular clues and cues once you're sitting down at those appointments. That's all that I really have prepared. Again, it was kind of a little bit of a short notice that Jesse wasn't going to be here today. So I hope that I was able to at least, open you up to some ideas that nonverbal communication is equally as important as the verbal. And you really got to use both of those to make the successful sale. So I'm going to leave this open for a little bit for any questions to come in. If nothing, comes out, then just let me know. If you want to email me, absolutely do that. It's jsmith@niceschloss.com. I think I have another slide for that too, but we'll see here. So here we go. Here's all my contact information. Again, you can reach any of the sales managers, whether you're working with the agencies direct or with any of the regional teams. Give us a call. We're always happy to help out however we can. We do these weekly seminars for your benefit. If you have any questions or any suggestions to what we can also talk about, next week or the week after, or something that's important to you, show us some recommendations. What sort of topics would you want us to cover? Or you can just give us a call anytime that you want, and we'll do more of a one-on-one training with you. We're always up for that. Thank you guys so much again. I really appreciate it. If you have anything else, definitely give us a call, shoot us an email. We're always around. We're always here to answer the phones. I think that's about going to be doing it for today. Thank you guys so much again. I hope you have a great rest of the day and a pleasant weekend if I don't talk to you before then. Take care now. Have a good one.